So today we have a two-part call. In the first half of this call, we will be talking with the folks from Pendle Finance, who have some pretty interesting integrations for rETH holders out there. We'll be getting into all about Pendle Finance and what you can do with your rETH to get some boosted returns for the first half. And then in the second half, we will be jumping back a week. Last week had a pretty jam-packed bi-weekly update, and thanks to the great call with Justin Drake, we actually did not get much time to go over it. So we will be covering some of that too. So to get started, Pendle Finance. What is Pendle Finance?
Hey, do you hear me well, first and foremost?
We can hear you pretty clearly.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm Tien, and yeah, so about Pendle Finance, right? I think the accurate answer here is that Pendle is a yield trading protocol that tokenizes any yield-bearing asset and allows the trading of the yield of these assets. But the simple way to explain Pendle is that it's a venue to purchase assets at a discount. So I think the general mechanics here on how we can enable the purchasing of assets at a discount is like pre-ordering an asset a few months in advance. And because the you're purchasing the asset sometime in advance, right? So you're entitled to some sort of discount.
Right, right.
But yeah, yeah. So it's like I guess like pre-ordering a game as well. Like you're prepaying it in advance, and then at the expected delivery date, you claim the game. Yeah. So that's kind of how it translates to how it works in crypto as
It's
well.
kind of like you're trading, in reality, it's like you're trading a bit of like time value for monetary value, or maybe even risk value.
Yeah. Yes. That's a good way to put it.
And so, how does that exactly translate into Pendle? How are people able to purchase assets at a discount? For example, a variety, you can do ETH and other things like I don't believe rETH was there for the pure discount, actually. I'm not sure.
Hmm. Yeah. So we've recently supported the rETH pool on Balancer, but how it works in general is so Pendle splits up the yield bearing asset, right? In this case, an LP token, into the principal and the yield components and represent them in the form of PT and YT. So PT basically stands for principal token, and then YT represents yield token. And because of the splitting of the yield from the actual underlying asset, these two components can be traded independently. And as such, we can establish yield markets around yield, like the yield bearing asset. And because the yield component is stripped away from the yield bearing asset itself, so the naturally the principal token will be trading at a discount relative to the underlying. Because I think, yeah, so I guess like using an analogy to explain how it is, right? Typically, how we explain it is like a house. So a house, say if you own a house, that house is your asset, and then when you rent out rooms in the house, you generate rental income. So that rental income is like your yield. So now what we do is we split up the yield, the rental income, and the house, and it effectively the splitting up of these two components, right, allows you to sell away the yeah, one or the other, right? So if you expect the income to like the rental income to drop in the coming months, what you can do is you can sell away that entire like income exposure for something immediate. And then, or if you, yeah, like if someone else anticipates that the rental income is going to go up in the coming months, then they can buy over from you.
So it's like a way of hedging for future volatility. To bring it back into,
Yeah.
say, ETH terms, so if a user had staked rETH and they wanted to separate that to the principal token, the yield token, well, the principal token would be pretty similar to just basic ETH. It wouldn't be accruing any value, but it just represents the underlying state thing there, whereas all the value starts accruing to the principal or the yield token. Is that right?
That is correct.
Got it. And so I believe Pendle has just recently launched V2. How has that changed things?
Yeah, so Pendle V2 has actually implemented quite a number of important upgrades. So generally speaking, there are three items. First and foremost, we have incorporated a new AMM to Pendle V2. So this new AMM is more capital efficient by up to a factor of 200. And then importantly, right, the way we structured the new AMM is so that the expected impermanent loss is minimalized and negligible in the case of V2. And how we achieve it is by pairing the two assets in the pool to be relatively to be very highly correlated. So as an example, we like the the assets in the pool would be PT of, let's say, a stake ETH against stake ETH as the underlying. So because these two assets are extremely correlated, they move in parallel in terms of price. So the impermanent loss is more or less predictable and quite negligible. So yeah, so from a liquidity provision standpoint, this is one of the major improvements. And then the second improvement that we've introduced to V2 is to make the listing of yield-bearing assets permissionless on Pendle. Because previously in V1, we've always been a gatekeeper. We've been approached by a number of other lending protocols or yield-bearing protocols to support their assets and allow for yield markets. But because of limited time and resources, we just couldn't enable that to happen. So in this case, I mean, the permissionless listing aspect is very much inspired by what Uniswap has achieved and enabled. So we think from a scaling standpoint, this is a very important step to take. And our objective here is to allow for any kind of yield generating venues or developers, right, to just set up pools, deposit the assets, and get anyone who's interested to trade the yield to participate. So that's the second item. And the third important upgrade that we've introduced to V2 is new interfaces to cater to a wider range of audience. So specifically, we have introduced simple UI and pro UI to cater to different groups of users. So simple UI abstracts away the complexities involved in yield trading. So this part here, I think this is one of the bigger push. I mean, like it's one of the more important pushes that we have for the V2 launch, because we want to have an interface to cater to a majority population within crypto, given that most people wouldn't have the understanding of the details of, say, interest rate swap or yield trades. So we want to have a simple UI to
Definitely can get
lower the barrier of
complicated with all the
participation.
yield, the acronyms that go around in DeFi. I can see why you would want to
Yeah,
simplify the UI.
absolutely. Yeah, so the simple UI is, I mean, it abstracts away all the complexities involved. It allows users to buy asset at a discount relatively easily. So what we want to achieve here is to allow users to look at the numbers, and if they are satisfied or they're agreeable with the numbers, then they deposit assets in just like 2 to 3 clicks. That's the same for liquidity provision as well. And then, of course, we have the Pro UI to cater to users who appreciate derivatives and want a bit more customization to how they structure their positions.
Awesome. That sounds like a really impressive achievement. So congratulations on the launch of V2.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's talk now a little bit more about the balancer pool. So if you go onto the Pendle UI, you can see that I believe the highest returning pool right now is in fact the Aura rETH pool. Or sorry, well, the Ape pool and Lux pool are a bit higher, but in terms of ETH and ETH derivatives, it is currently the highest at a potential 43.1% APR. So could you just go through and explain where this APR comes from?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, let me answer this one. So basically, when you do contribute to the pool, you are exposed to several incentives. So first of all, you are accruing yield from the base underlying assets, which is from the Aura pool, and you receive both the BAL and Aura rewards, and as well as the swap fees, right, from the balancer
So
pool.
step one, you say,
But
is
not only,
the asset.
yeah,
So when I go into this pool, step one is that ETH gets put into this pool. So that's the first part of the yield.
yes. So the asset that is actually included into or contribute into the Pendle pools is the LP token itself from the Aura pool. So we take that LP token, create a market out of it or another pool out of it, paired with the underlying. So it's basically PT of the Aura pool plus the underlying, and create a Pendle pool out of that. And in that pool, you receive the base incentives, which is the Aura and BAL rewards, plus the swap fees from the balancer pool, as well as the swap fees from the Pendle AMM, and the accruing, like if you've contributed into or like locked in like a Pendle, then you would receive like some Pendle incentives as well. And yeah, like the accruing yield from from PT and YT from the underlying token. Yeah. So yeah, I guess like all in all, right, you'd be exposed to all those like base incentives. Yeah.
Got it, got it. So when you do provide it, you have to choose a maturity period. Is this essentially like a lockup for the yield to be split based on?
Yeah. So the maturity date is something that can be decided by anyone, especially for those who would want to create a pool permissionlessly. Now, for this pool, it's something that the team has decided on. And the maturity date is there because we have to give a period on which the yield will be accruing for YT until a certain date, right? Or until your PT would be redeemable by that expiry date, right? So that's what that maturity date represents. So once we hit the maturity date, which is December 27, 2023, then all yield will stop accruing to YT, and then you can take your PT and then redeem it for the full underlying value of it. Of course, even before that, you can actually exit your position at any time because of this AMM.
That's right. So a bit more about the AMM. Let's say an individual goes and locks up their balancer pool and gets their PT and YT tokens, and then they go into the LP pool and they start LPing these tokens, right?
Yep.
Uh, so
Yep.
as long as they LP through the lockup period, essentially they're ensuring that they get all the yield they would have gotten just by being in the Aura pool already, right? They have the same exact tokens,
Yep.
but now they've
Exactly.
also gained the yield of the AMM swaps from people who want to exit their yield early.
Yes, exactly. So they not only receive the swap fees from people who trade on the Pendle AMM, but they also receive those sweet Pendle incentives as well.
And do you have to lock any Pendle up to earn those Pendle rewards, or is it a multiplying effect?
Right. So we have a VE model that is similar to VCRV or VE curve. And so if you lock a Pendle, you can vote on which pools to incentivize. Right now, of course, most of the users has voted on the rETH pool to incentivize or like to channel those incentives to. So that's kind of like one way where you'd be receiving those Pendle incentives. And then you'd be able to boost from your base APY of 19% to up until 43% or 2.5x.
Wow, impressive. Just for clarity, so say I didn't have any Pendle, but I wanted to get exposure to the protocol, would I still earn Pendle if I'm in the L or in the AMM, or do I have to lock Pendle to earn Pendle?
Yeah, you definitely have to lock some Pendle up in the V Pendle to be able to be exposed to that.
Got it, got it. So I hear that there is an announcement about real yield. What is that about?
Right. So as a V Pendle holder, um, you also accrue yield or like earn some yield from a percentage of YT, which is around 3%, if I'm not wrong. And also so the Pendle AMM also earns swap fees, right? Now, a portion of the swap fees, about 0.1% for 1 year maturity, will be directed back into these V Pendle holders. And that all this yield is converted into USDC. So and this yield, right? This USDC yield is given to you every 4 weeks. So every 4 weeks, you would expect like some, accrued USDC yield by just locking up some V Pendle.
Got it, got it. And is there any approximations on how that APR has fared so far, or is it pretty or too early to tell?
Yeah, you can definitely check the dashboard in the V Pendle page. Sorry, somebody called. You can check the V Pendle page in the like the dashboard, and if you try to lock up, you can see how much is the current APR, and I think right now it's about 9%.
That's pretty good. Is there any else interesting about the Pendle tokenomics that you would want to cover?
Yeah, so right now it's mainly like one of the core features is the Pendle right now, like locking up and channel incentives.
Exactly. So I think
I was
that's
trying to call. But yeah, like aside from that, I guess I guess it's something that you just have to look forward to in the future. We're definitely like have some things in store in the future, especially when we're looking to more cross-chain deployments. But yeah, like future announcements will be there for sure.
sweet, sweet. And on that topic of cross-chain deployments, that obviously brings with it a host of security concerns. What has Pendle done for security?
Yeah, so in terms of security, we definitely take it very seriously. With the launch of V2, we have had 6 audits conducted to just evaluate the security of the contracts. And out of these 6, of the 3, we have so the top auditors on Code Arena. So that's one aspect. And then secondly, we also have an ongoing bounty program on Immunify. In that, like, if anyone in the community comes across bugs or improvements that they want to recommend to the team, they can do so with reward or over Immunify. Yeah.
Do you know approximately how big the bug bounty is on Immunify?
So we've had 200K up to 200K, sorry, 200 grand of rewards, depending on the severity of bug reported.
Right, Rocket Pool also has the same graduated bug bounty system.
Mm-hmm.
So stepping back now, say I am a rETH holder and I come into Pendle and I'm pretty unfamiliar with DeFi. How should I approach the protocol?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of like one thing that we're working on with Pendle, right? Like with this narrative of buying assets at a discount. So instead of like as a user, right, and you don't want to be exposed to a lot of risk, but you definitely want to be exposed to something like rETH, right, and be able to take part with those staking rewards plus other rewards from these pools, like from Balancer or etc. Then you can just get exposure to this asset through Pendle instead by buying this asset at a discount. So I think that's kind of like the simplest way we can approach retail. They don't have to know the intricacies of like how the whole DeFi system works, but on their dashboard especially, they can just see that they're holding this asset, and then after a period of time, by maturity, they're able to redeem it for its full value.
Is there any associated volatility risk? Say, for example, a pool for some reason has all of its incentives go to zero in the middle of a week, perhaps like a Bancor situation. Uh, what happens in such a case? Does uh, the principal token not end up yielding the same amount, or is it all abstracted away?
So I guess like, yeah, for your question, right? Would it be something like hypothetically the underlying asset would stop receiving BAL and or rewards as well?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So I guess that, because the PT represents a discounted version of the underlying asset. So even if the underlying asset stops receiving those rewards, you still have bought it cheaper. And then by the end of maturity, you're still able to redeem it for the underlying value. So whatever that, market price of the underlying asset is, well, it's a separate market all in all, but you'll basically be able to just redeem it for that underlying asset.
So the underlying asset, the PT, should stay safe, and that should all just be absorbed by the YT side, right?
Yeah. So as YT essentially goes to zero because
Yep.
there's no more yield and nobody, would want to acquire that anymore. And all that value should, redirect back to PT. Yeah. Essentially,
Okay.
you're right. Yeah.
So how does Pendle separate itself from other fixed income protocols such as Element.fi? I'm not sure about the others, but yeah, what makes Pendle stand out?
I guess like couple of things. So in a like one part is with regard to the in regards to the flexibility of liquidity provision. So as of now, I believe that we're still the one protocol that allows users to withdraw liquidity. Like um, suppose you deposit liquidity into a pool that expires, let's say 27th of December this year, and you change your mind about liquidity provision tomorrow. You can actually withdraw the liquidity before the expiration of the pool, right? In most other pools of other fixed rate protocols, the liquidity once deposited will be locked up until the maturity. So we prioritize the flexibility of liquidity provision because, I mean, this is crypto, and we think that it's important to allow some sort of optionality for users. And this is something that we incorporated into the design of our protocol. Secondly, I think the permissionless aspect is also a pretty big distinction between our protocol and other fixed rate protocols because we think from a scaling standpoint, it just makes sense to allow any kind of yield bearing assets to be listed and supported, so that their users can establish a yield market of their choice. And I think with like most other protocols, it fundamentally depends on the operating team to list and support assets. Yeah, in our case, like we try to encourage the community developers to set up pools of their choice.
We of
Yeah.
course at Rocket Pool love permissionless listing. We have permissionless validators, so definitely appreciate that mentality. Anthony, you were to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well. So it's one of the reasons why we've authored this EIP, which is EIP 5115, that makes it basically easy for any developer to be able to create this standardized assets, because for all or yield generating protocols, it's difficult for there's basically no standard to interact with one another, right? So we've created the standard to be able to do that. You can think of it as a natural.
We actually lost the beginning of you there. So just to recap, this is an EAP that is creating a standard for yield-bearing assets.
Yep. Sorry, I lost you there.
Yeah, I was just reconfirming that you were suggesting that Pendle is working on EIP that creates a standard for yield-bearing assets, right?
Yeah, got it. Yeah. So yeah, we authored this EIP 5115 that makes it that creates a standard and easy for any developer to be able to create a standardized yield asset, right? That allows any of these yield-bearing assets to interact with one another. So one of the problems of this different yield-generating protocols is that there's no standard on how they interact with one another, and that's how we're able to allow anyone to permissionlessly list their yield-bearing asset on Pendle. you can think of it as a natural progression of 4626 or EIP 4626. The only problem with 4626 is that it only supports vaults right now, whereas our EIP can support any kind of like yield generating kind of method. So you can think of like a AMMs, AMMLPs, or a position like a staking position or vaults as well, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's kind of like one thing that it enables.
Would that be a token represented or?
Yeah, it's basically a token, and that's actually the token that is in the AMM, in our AMM. So our AMM is actually a pairing of PT and the EIP 5115 token that is kind of like wrapping the, let's say like the rETH balancer pool. So we wrap that into an EIP 5115 token, and then we pair that up with PT, and that would be your pool on Pendle.
Sweet, that makes sense.
Yep.
So for any listeners, if you have questions about Pendle, feel free to ask them here or in the Discord. Any final thoughts you would like to say? I think Rocket Pool, given its robust, decentralized, permissionless nature, has a good future with Pendle.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having us. In the case that you have any questions or inquiries related to Pendle or any kind of like the rETH pool on Pendle, feel free to reach out to us, either DM on Twitter or directly on Discord. Like we have a reasonably vibrant community on Discord. The URL invite link is on the website, like Pendle.finance. Yeah.
Great, thank you for being here. Feel free to stick around as we transition into the second half of this call, if any questions come up. The second half of ours. Yep.
No, I just want to, once again, thanks a lot for having us.
Yep, yeah, thanks as well.
Cheers, it was a great call. Very great protocol. Happy to have you. So, as we move on to our second half of the call, we had quite a busy couple of weeks. The bi-weekly last week was a bit rushed as we had a very prominent guest in Justin Drake. Mav, do you want to give us a brief recap of that call?
G'day. Yeah. Was it 90 minutes all up, I think, between Justin and the bi-weekly? And of course, it happened to be the largest bi-weekly we've had to date, I think.
Yeah.
Although, who knows, maybe the upcoming one will challenge that. There just seems to be non-stop action in the Rocket Pool ecosystem. But yeah, for anyone who's not aware, Justin Drake is a very prominent Ethereum researcher and can be credited with the origins of the ultrasound money meme that we all know and love. And I think it was hinted at the start of this call, but yeah, Justin has obviously some very well-informed, but also very bullish expectations for the Ethereum ecosystem and ETH staking in particular. So first of all, I would really encourage everyone to have a listen to the recording, which is on YouTube now. We have sectioned it out, so it's clear the area where Justin's talking if you don't want to listen to the bi-weekly speed run. What we're also going to do is to clip up some of the highlights from the call because it did go to an hour or so just with Justin, and we will upload them separately with a new refreshed YouTube thumbnail because I got jealous of Rocket Fuel's redesign of Sleety, I think it was. But yeah, long story short, not only does ETH staking have a very bright future, Rocket Pool is extremely well positioned to play a leading role in that. So I think if there's any kind of call or AMA that we've ever done that's worth a listen to, it's this one. So highly recommend it. And yeah, there's still a lot we can probably recap or provide some additional details on from the previous bi-weekly, but even in the week in between, there's been a lot going on as well. So plenty for us to have a chat about.
That's right. I think some of my favorite moments from that call had to be the ease at which Justin transitioned from trillion-dollar industry to multi-trillion-dollar industry when referring to staking and Ethereum more broadly. If that catches your fancy, definitely check that call out. Justin, again, also works on the ultrasound relay, which is doing a fantastic job as it is another non-censoring relay. But we have a ton to cover, more detailed in Rocket Pool. So let's jump on into it. One thing that really caught my eye from the bi-weekly update is that there are some special oracles being developed by the team. They are going to feature on Polygon and ZK Sync 2.0. So, is there anything you can speak about this, Maverick?
A little bit. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone from the technical side of the Rockable team on this call today. We will next week. So if there are any kind of specific or detailed tech questions, well, of course, there's always the Discord, but otherwise we can go into that next week. But just off the daily stand-up call, and Kane mentioned that he is working on these today and hopes to get everything up and running and tested on testnet by end of day. So good progress being made there.
Some real hustle from the team going into these exchanges. And I can say I've been fortunate enough to be privy to the Polygon conversations, and the Polygon team's business dev and coordination team is top notch. So seems that is good stuff coming. I suggest keeping your eye on the rETH liquidity incentives chat, as the Polygon people have already been in there chatting about future plans. ZK Sync 2.0 is sort of a mystery for us in the community, given that we don't know really when ZK Sync 2.0 is going to go live. I doubt you can tell or give us any clues about that, but it's awesome to see that Rocket Pool is essentially going to be ready to onboard that whole ecosystem.
Yep, indeed. So the last that I heard was, let's say, some point during Q1, which I suppose gives kind of 2 months. I'm not very precise and don't want to put kind of words in their mouth, but that was the feeling that I got based on the very high-level discussions we've had. But yeah, a lot of work.
It seems like a lot of teams across the ecosystem are really targeting ETH Denver or the time period thereafter for major announcements.
Yeah, it's definitely no coincidence that a few of these different protocols we're chatting to, talking about integrations, they all say, "Oh yeah, look, we're kind of targeting a 1 to 2 month time frame." It's like, oh, interesting that everything's kind of aligning all around that same time, which works quite well for us, I think. I mean, while we all want to see integrations and progress made sooner rather than later, there is potentially something to be said for a bit of a focused and coordinated effort around Atlas and withdrawals, rather than kind of going a little bit too soon, at least with any kind of co-marketing collaboration attempts, having that initial impact kind of being diluted before we can open up all that additional rETH capacity.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think if we can maximize our sort of collaborative potential, it's just going to pay dividends on our own upgrades. So definitely looking forward to ETH Denver and what comes out of that. Another major announcement, a collaborative announcement, is MetaMask. So MetaMask has integrated Rocket Pool's staking, as well as Lido staking, into the MetaMask wallet itself. So the community did a little bit of digging and found some interesting things about this onboarding. So when you go and stake through MetaMask, currently you cannot actually use the Rocket Pool option, given it's the deposit pool is perpetually full. I do have a 5 RPL bounty on the first person who can prove that they used the MetaMask wallet to stake and make rETH, FYI. But the community found in its investigations that there's actually a proxy contract in between the deposit pool slash stETH minting contract and the MetaMask front end. And what's actually happening is that there is a potential in the future for MetaMask to implement their own fee take. So currently there is no fee take. If you stake stETH, you get the exact amount of stETH you are due, but it is worth noting that the potential for a fee is there. But that's a bit of on the detailed side. It's much more important to note that MetaMask is huge. It was one of the top generating apps in all of crypto for years now, given its huge adoption rates and exchange fee. So they definitely will look to maximize the reach of their staking product, because for them it is a money-making avenue.
So interesting. The team weren't aware of this launch. It was a nice little surprise and got a little bit of media coverage, and I think helped to kind of position us at kind of Lido's level, right, in terms of different tiers or how people might view different liquid staking protocols. But we have subsequently got in touch with the guys over at MetaMask, and don't have any specifics, but they said they're working on some additional improvements, enhancements to that interface, the kind of, I suppose, functionality and the way it communicates to a user, the different options and all of that. I do believe that they have been in the Discord having a look around, and I recall there were some suggestions made by, I forget exactly who was in that discussion. I was going to say probably the usual suspect. I recall Invis having like something about stars, DeFi.
It was actually a pretty well nuanced answer with it was like a bar system with 3 different categories of efficiency, security, something else, but it was very well reasoned.
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe that will make its way into MetaMask. I don't really know what they're planning, but again, it could work out quite well if this is yet another thing that happens around that kind of critical time towards the end of Q1.
That's right. In some ways, this early MetaMask onboarding is good for our credibility, our word, our reputation. However, it is ineffective as of now, given the supply issues. Of course, given what you've said, perhaps this will not maintain the case for long. However, this does just speak to the value of coordinating things around the Atlas release, since Atlas itself is going to be the moment when the rETH supply is finally unlocked.
I suppose for MetaMask it is a little bit tricky, right? Because they could end up being the kind of single source of truth deciding on how integrated a particular LSD is, right? Like they make the call whether to give Rocket Pool 3 or 4 stars. I'm not sure. I mean, if I put myself in MetaMask's position, I'm not sure I would want to have to be continually monitoring and updating that, and also potentially having to front criticism from the various LSD communities every time someone gets, one new integration or takes one tiny little step towards decentralization, and having to kind of fight off people saying, oh, that's worth an extra star. So, I mean, I can understand from their perspective that it does make sense to launch something simple, straightforward, and clear and objective, and that it might not be the easiest thing for them to get into that whole ranking system, but still at the same time, it sounds like they have some thoughts, have some plans. So whatever it is, we all know that Rocket Pool has a lot going for it. So I'm sure it will be favorable, whatever the outcome. We'll have to keep an eye on what they're doing over there.
I think we have a question coming in from Andre, but yeah, just to reiterate on what you were saying, they have a tricky position, and they went with one of a fairly simple and hard to criticize route, which is displaying based on APR. which is pretty much the DeFi standard. So while it's not the complete picture, there's definitely reasons behind it. And so, Andre, I see you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but I've been looking at all the different LSD protocols, and what I'm interested in Rocket Pool is for, could Rocket Pool have a larger TAM than the rest of them? So, for example, Lido can only stake its percentage of the market share at 30 to 33%. Could Rocket Pool potentially be higher than that because it's decentralized? Thank you.
Definitely not a stupid question. In fact, it's a very important question and one that we need to actively be talking about. So people will go various ways on this. There are some that will argue that no, Rocket Pool should not be given any leniency or any extra control of the market just because of its more distributed node operator set. And in many ways, I tend to agree with them because some of the risks that Rocket Pool has are fundamental to protocols writ large. The smart contract risk, the governance token risk. And so while there is more credibility to the argument that Rocket Pool could justify a larger market share than 33%, I personally don't think it should happen. There is a thread ongoing in the Discord as well as the DAO forum about self-limiting principles and whether Rocket Pool should codify a self-limiting aspect. Actually, this is one of the topics we were going to cover in the call, so we might as well just jump to that if I can find it on the DAO forum. But yeah.
I have it open here in preparation, but maybe while you're navigating to it, Jasper, I can touch on a few important concepts. I think, well, so first of all, yeah, DAO forum, thread called self-limiting principles. And an important distinction that it makes is considering the environment. So Rocket Pool obviously does not exist in a vacuum. As we've just covered, there's other LSD protocols out there, and they all have their different approaches to decentralization or lack thereof. And it kind of makes sense to me that we should consider what is happening in this space when deciding what route to take. And there are two important things to consider when it comes to a limit or a cap, and that is whether we're talking about a hard cap or a soft cap. So hard cap being taking steps to actively prevent the protocol from growing. This is potentially a bit more of a contentious step, considering that one of the kind of key principles of Rocket Pool is being permissionless, that anyone can be a node operator. But there's potentially other routes in terms of a soft limit where it is possible for Rocket Pool to continue growing technically, but maybe there are some steps to make the protocol less efficient or disincentivize people, or to wind back potentially marketing efforts or attempts to promote Rocket Pool. Who knows, maybe even going to the step of helping out what might otherwise be a competing decentralized protocol. So those two things, that's an important distinction. But also we should recall that generally this discussion is made with the context of market share. So if we think that ETH staking over time will continue to trend upwards, that means for Rocket Pool to maintain a given market share, it also has to grow in line with the overall ETH staking sector. So I feel like it would only be a very long-term decision to have to make regarding a hard cap, because likely in the medium term, people will continue to stake ETH, and that means even if Rocket Pool was capped out, so to speak, on market share, there would still be a need to continue to grow, to maintain that, and that kind of points towards some kind of soft cap management. But yeah, maybe Jasper, you had a few thoughts to add on that?
Yeah, I think soft cap is definitely the way to go. And just for a little bit of context, as we're talking about the threshold 33% brought up earlier, Other people have thrown out even lower values. Superfizz and the Rocket Pool core team have discussed 22%. I believe Italics had something even lower. But yeah, there's a variety of opinions, and I definitely encourage you to go look at the RPIP currently in draft mode. What's interesting is that we currently, right now, are experiencing a form of soft cap because of the cap on the deposit call. Right now, rETH is trading at a premium, which is a fairly strong disincentive for anyone to purchase any rETH, right? Because you're essentially operating with the under the notion that you're losing right now like a couple months worth of yield just by buying the token because of the premium, because eventually it's going to go to zero with the Atlas upgrade. So we already in some ways have precedent for soft caps, unintentionally of course, but in the future I think it's something to consider as a means of slowing growth without any form of hard cap. So did that answer your question, Andre?
Yeah, that
Andrew,
answers my question. Thanks for taking it. And, I love the space. Thank you guys again for hosting it.
Thank you. Yeah, if anyone else has questions, whether it be by topics we are bringing up or about the Pendle call in the first half, feel free to raise their hand. But yeah, self-limiting is a very important topic, and I'm glad the community is actively discussing it. So some fun things have been happening in the community. 2 streams, which represent essentially the polar opposites of each other, happened, which were the Kevin Owocki and Hudson Jameson streams. So both of these were intentioned to be sort of like major Ethereum OGs taking the orange pill and setting up their Rocket Pool validators. And the Kevin Owocki stream went great. He had a representative from Gitcoin who's actually running the nodes for him. And anything you want to comment on that stream? I actually did not manage to catch most of it.
Well, actually, I was going to say the same thing. I have to admit that one kind of fell through the cracks for me. I recall getting the Hudson Jameson stream loaded into the event section of Discord, and I think we might have given that a bit of a retweet. But the former got lost. I feel like that was around the same time that the centralized exchange chaos was happening. So I'm not sure if there's a recording anywhere. Potentially we could grab that and kind of help to promote
This
that.
Yeah, that call was again hosted by Superfizz, so shout out to Superfizz. Kevin Owocki is an Ethereum OG. He was a co-founder of Gitcoin and now hosts the Green Pill, the Bankless show. So he's definitely an Ethereum OG and very aligned with the core ethos, and it's great to see him sort of acknowledging that Rocket Pool is now ready for the adoption of even sort of the most risk-averse for critical groups of the sector. So I see Chanan also has a question. As he comes up, we can talk a little bit about the Hudson Jameson stream, which was a true pleasure to be a part of. I was fortunate enough to join at the start when it was me, Hudson, Anthony Sassano of the Daily Gwei, and Kane from the core team. Essentially just relaxing, having fun, and painstakingly slowly, guide Hudson through the process of setting up a node. And although on the front it may have appeared somewhat of a mess, it's important to note that Hudson is actually a very technically proficient individual and was attempting to set up a Rocket Pool node in a very niche way that no one really used to. We even had Patches, a legend of support, on the call, and it was definitely a stream for entertainment and shitposting more than it was educational, but it was profound in that it sort of highlighted a novel approach to node operation that wasn't really well understood previously.
I did jump in and out of that stream, and yeah, hopefully no one took it too seriously in terms of that technical side of things you were mentioning, Jasper. But yeah, I think that there is a recording of that on YouTube available, right?
I believe so. Yeah, and so Chandan, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, GM. So I think currently the returns on Rocket Pool is lower than Lido, right?
It depends on the week, but on average, it is about 5% lower. Or sorry, 5% of the total APR, so like 0.1 to 0.3% APR lower, given the commission and our idle ETH sitting in the deposit pool.
Okay, so I think like most of the people who don't care about decentralization will end up using Lido, right? So can we in the future increase the Rocket Pool return rewards?
It's a complicated question because Rocket Pool is first and foremost a decentralized and security-focused protocol, not aiming to be the highest returning one. So I don't think even Lido is going to maintain title of highest APR because Frax already gives a higher APR. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think Rocket Pool is going to make any pivot towards trying to beat Lido or beat Frax for highest APR. However, there are definitely avenues that Rocket Pool can explore to increase the APR to get closer and decrease the gap. For example, the Atlas upgrade is going to dramatically increase the rETH supply, which will decrease the effect of idle ETH sitting in the deposit pool. Further, the Atlas upgrade will also reduce the commission rate from 15% to 14%, which will, again, reduce the gap that rETH has with Steve. But yeah, thank you for your question.
Yeah, and like so.
Sorry, we have a lot to get over. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, though. Anything you want to add about APRs, Mav, or should we just continue?
Yeah, just that from a marketing point of view, I think Rocket Pool has had great success promoting itself in terms of being the decentralized LSD, and that, as you say, and as we've kind of seen from the past few months in this industry, not only is competing on APR challenging, because there will always be someone who finds a way to magically produce additional APR out of thin air, it can also backfire, because if we think about the kind of people who are potentially power users of LSDs or wanting to run, or especially wanting to run validators, run mining pools, these people are more likely to be aligned with the core values of Ethereum in terms of decentralization. And I know, at least for me personally, an increased APY would actually be something that would turn me away from a protocol, just because of that basic financial concept, right? That there's something called, well, there's a relationship between risk and reward. Generally, higher risk comes with a higher reward, and vice versa. So I think the difference is not too extreme that we have to be concerned. And again, in this context of self-limiting, we have currently this, I suppose, capital inefficient structure that LEBs is helping to address. And even with this, the growth in terms of ETH deposited with Rocket Pool is huge. So I don't think, for one, it's a concern. It's certainly something to monitor, but also realistically, Rocket Pool's objective is not to capture 100% of the market anyway. So I think there's always space for someone else who can at least claim to produce a higher APY. It will be interesting to see, though, in terms of the overall market sentiment right now, concerns about centralization. We all know what can happen with the cyclical nature of the industry, and at some point in the future, there's probably a very high chance that these concerns will fade away. People will be chasing the highest yield, We kind of rinse and repeat. Unfortunately, people do seem to have, or either have short memories, or with more people joining the space, lacking the kind of background and context that trap does kind of crop up from time to time. Hopefully, for everyone's sake, in the ETH staking LSD world, there aren't any kind of incidents around higher APR and higher risks. But yeah, I think Rocket Pool's in a good space.
Yeah, Superfizz tweeted very succinctly earlier about essentially what we're talking about here, where the LSD market, just given how massive it is going to be and already is prime retail for scam artists and Ponzi schemes to eventually form. And unfortunately, the bull market is where these Ponzi's thrive, and as we're currently in a bear market, so they're not quite as prevalent, but they are bound to return. We can remember that Luna essentially was based on a staking Ponzi scheme. Well, Ponzi scheme is a stretch, but the Luna staked on Anchor protocol through with Lido, Steve involved as well, was used to mint USDT, which artificially drove up demand for the tokens based on an unsustainable yield that eventually ended up collapsing and destroying a ton of the LSD holders' value. So while I remain hopeful that the market will gain some resiliency and that this time around won't ape into such products, I fully expect the return of Ponzi's to find their way into the LSD space and build themselves up also around narratives like Eigenlayer and the externals of the LSD space.
This call is definitely going to go past 90 minutes, isn't it?
Maybe, we'll see. So, yeah, moving
That's
on
all
to...
good. There's lots to talk about, right? So, yeah. See how we go.
Moving on a bit now, let's jump into a little bit of alpha. In this interim period from the previous biweekly update to today, there have been some interesting advents in the community. Fortunately, I have been the liaison from the community, the IMC, with the Chainlink team. And the Chainlink team has had some pretty good insights for us. Mav, do you want to lead this up for now? And I will add on what I can.
I mean, feel free if you want to talk about this, and then I can add on a little bit at the end around kind of the final piece to fall into place before we can talk about implementation.
So the Chainlink team has essentially confirmed that Rocket Pool rETH has met its criteria for acceptance. So this was broadly meeting a certain amount of volume and being on a certain number of different exchanges. What this means is, hopefully, that they have also, what this means is, in addition, they have also signaled that they are going to begin building the Oracle, which hopefully means that the Oracle will actually be available to turn on sometime in the near future. It's unclear, however, how that will progress, as there are still some meetings that need to go on with the Chainlink team to discuss how that'll transact. Do you have any information for us, Mav, about sort of these next steps, or is it still a bit of a mystery?
Little bit of a mystery. It is a discussion that Langas is having with the team. But yeah, so to recap, there's kind of 3 steps. 1, meeting the criteria, that's a tick. 2, actually building the Oracle, that's a kind of tick / work in progress, finalizing a few bits and pieces. And the 3rd one is switching everything on and implementing it. On this point, it's not free to run an Oracle. So the discussion that we're having with Chainlink is just around the kind of usage and cost from their side. And this is why there is this volume requirement, right? Otherwise, you'll get, I think don't know if this is a New Zealand saying, but every man and his dog coming along saying, oh, I've got the greatest product, you should build us an Oracle. And if the usage case isn't there, if there aren't kind of a sufficient number of DeFi protocols lining up to make use of the functionality, then the ROI doesn't make sense from Chainlink's point of view. So it's just finalizing and I suppose making sure that Chainlink is comfortable with the business case. I don't expect it to be a blocker or a problem, but I suppose it just comes down to that question of when, and that is something that I'm not too sure about. I feel like we're talking a matter of weeks, not days. This isn't something that's going to drop on Friday kind of thing. But I wouldn't say it's several weeks away. I honestly don't have an idea on the timeline, other than we have made progress, despite it being "quote unquote" coming soon for months, if not years. But
About 2 years.
home stretch. Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah, it's interesting. So some of my earliest badgering of the Rocket Pool core team when I was a fair little newbie was asking them when Chainlink, and at the time I obviously didn't yet understand what went into getting the Chainlink Oracle, and it's sort of like a nice little circle that I've gone through the ringer to now be able to understand how silly I was back then trying to ask when Chainlink when the average daily volume on the token was like 1 million or less. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that the protocol had to do some serious growing to become naturally sustainable for an Oracle, and it's great to see Rocket Pool now meeting that requirement. Another thing that went on in the community that was at first a little bit slept on until Whack covered it in Rocket Fuel was that Joe slipped that there was a potential date for launch of Atlas being discussed by the team. Were you privy to this conversation, and did you immediately then use CowSwap to make a transaction with your mic accidentally unmuted?
That was a little while ago, and it was just to clean up some different altcoins I had lying around into ETH. I think there was some like Aura and Balancer and bits and pieces. So we had another chat about this today. I don't think the date is still locked down, but the kind of window that we're looking at is within kind of 2 to 2.5 months from now. So late March into early first half April. Obviously, all of this is dependent on audits, right? So we do have the second audit from CD underway now. I believe they're starting to feedback some feedback to the team. The guys are looking at that, and that will kind of determine the final timeline. So it is still a little bit early to be talking about dates. Arguably even too early to be talking about the kind of time frame that I've just given. So that is still highly provisional and subject to move around a bit. But slowly getting there, getting closer. And
is the team keeping a close eye on how the Shanghai hard fork itself is progressing?
So I just saw before Langer's shared something. I think at least a couple of the guys have been paying attention to the various calls that are happening to understand the progress there, because the launch of Atlas, as I understand it from my non-technical point of view, is somewhat dependent on Shanghai in terms of if Atlas launches before or shortly after, there's potentially a different kind of implementation or like maybe a phased approach that is subject to change as well. So I suppose this is another thing, right, in terms of everyone wants to get this medium out, I mean, myself included, that talks about Atlas, have a town hall to chat about it in great detail, and to kind of pick a date and work towards that. But we do have the elephant in the room being Shanghai, and as that is not locked in yet, there's still a little bit of uncertainty with regards to Atlas. So even if we did have all the audits completed and everything ready to go, still a bit of a question mark.
Right, definitely important. So if Atlas ends up being earlier than expected, the team will have to act a certain way. And from your understanding, do you think it would be ready to act if it was, say, in like a mid-March or an early March Shanghai somehow?
I feel like that's unlikely, but considering that we will all be in Denver, I can't see
Right, they
much
wouldn't do it during a Denver.
being happening. And on that point, I guess there'll probably be some other influential Ethereum people attending too, right? So probably makes sense that it would come afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, another reason why everyone sort of coordinates around seems to be coordinating around ETH Denver. It just makes the whole protocol, so the whole ecosystem work a little better. So there have been some great grant and bounty applications, and the period for applications is now over. The grant and bounty committee is now in the process of deciding, and they will be releasing their decisions on the 31st. It's important to know that following the release of those decisions, there will be a 2-week period where people can submit uh, a request for an appeal. If they see someone's award that they disagree with, they will have the right to challenge it and sort of bring it to the whole protocol DAO's attention to be discussed. Yeah, there is also a variety of votes in the governance sector that are going to soon be rolling around. There are this includes the self-limiting principle. The Grant and Bounties Committee has a modification to their sort of structure that they want considered. And then there is also a sort of 6-month review of the IMC. So a huge sort of wave of governance is soon to be coming. So definitely keep your eye on that. Has there been any commentary from the team internally about the grant and bounty round? I'm wondering what they think about the different applications.
Yeah, I think a good place for people to go to is the DAO forum discussion thread, where there's kind of an open discussion on the various submissions. The thread with the submissions itself is extremely long. I scrolled from the top to the bottom just before, and it took a very long time. I think from my perspective, being on the team but not the GMC, I don't want to kind of call out specific applications here.
Well, I will say by being not on the GMC, it's sort of better to commentate. If you were on the GMC, you probably shouldn't be commentating.
Yeah, that is a good point. But yeah, what was definitely very clear is that, and it's something that I say quite a lot when I'm chatting to other protocols and explaining what Rocket Pool is, and that is the strength of the community. And not only is it strong in one area, but we have a very wide range of skills from the technical side, smart contract work, design, front end, back end, everything, right? Through to DeFi and marketing topics. So I'm not sure exactly who made the point in that discussion thread, but treating the GMC program as I guess a force multiplier and an ability to extend the power and speed at which Rocket Pool can develop by compensating community members appropriately really does make sense. And I mean, if you consider the retrospective part, it's clear that there's already been a lot of work done already by a lot of different community members, and some of that has been clearly invaluable to Rocket Pool. I mean, the number of times that I tell people to go and read this or look at this dashboard, and every time it's kind of with a disclaimer, oh, this isn't actually something that's official, but also everyone uses it. And it is the like de facto source.
It's better. It's community official.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's the thoughts around the GMC. But judging by the length of that thread of the applications, there is potentially a lot of work involved with getting to a conclusion there. So, hats off to all the members who are putting in work to decide how these funds should be dispersed. Not an easy job, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. There are millions of dollars at play here with the GMC, so their decisions have far-reaching consequences. I do not envy them in the slightest, but I do thank them for their service. It was actually interesting that you comment that the GMC should or might be better off thinking of itself as a multiplier on the core team because the way we look at the GMC was itself being heavily debated in the thread on commentaries for the applications because people were not sure how to evaluate the work being done in terms of compensation. So whether they should be seen as informal staff or sort of hobbyists that are then just being rewarded. It's a very tricky and philosophical discussion. However, I believe personally, I am not on the GMC, and I should state that I am requesting funding, so I am slightly biased in this. Quite a bit of funding I've requested, actually. But I believe by treating the GMC as a full-time sort of extension, we are maximizing our potential return. But yeah, this is something that I encourage people to go on and talk about if they have a strong opinion about. Yeah.
I think
sorry. Yeah.
just jump in quickly before you say what I think you're going to say. But I think consistency is key, right? Like, sure, there's different approaches and different opinions on that topic, but so long as whatever kind of framework is applied consistently across all the applications, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's funny because that itself was a question of debate, whether it should be a more objective set of criteria or a more subjective set of criteria. Again, this is very tricky. If you have an opinion, make yourself heard in either the governance channel or on the DAO forum. There is still time left before the decisions are made. So that actually covers all of the major topics I wanted to hit off of the bi-weekly. Is there anything else that stood out to you, Mav, in these past week?
Yeah, definitely a few things for me to add that weren't mentioned in the bi-weekly, sort of more recent developments. Let me just check what we have covered off. So there was a bit of an impromptu chit-chat.
Oh, yeah.
24 hours ago. I think that was around the time that RPL was in up-only mode. I think it's come down a little bit. So maybe those millions of dollars in the GMC are not quite as large as as it was before. But regardless, there was just a small group of us having a bit of a chat about what's going on, and I shared a couple of stories that maybe I should repeat here, given that chit chat wasn't recorded or anything. But one was an interesting observation that came out of all the attention that Rocket Pool's been getting. We're obviously all aware that this so-called LSD narrative is pumping pretty strong, and that is kind of a sector-wide thing that affects all protocols. So just based on that, right, Rocket Pool kind of has a leg up in terms of getting some cut through in the world of crypto Twitter in particular, which is at least one factor that would translate through to increased attention in terms of the RPL token. Then obviously the round of centralized exchange listings, Binance in particular, played a big role. But to the story, with that context, every now and again, someone will reach out offering services for paid marketing. So this is something that exists in the space. It's fairly prevalent. I'm not sure personally how many protocols make use of it, but basically it's an offer to have increased awareness, or at least perceived awareness on your protocol by getting it trending on various different platforms. I'm not sure the exact mechanic, but apparently some are easier to, I suppose, manipulate than others. But regardless, there are people who offer the service for a fee. And every time I have a bit of a standard response, thanks for reaching out. This isn't the way that Rocket Pool does business, or the best kind of thing. And there was one account in particular where this interaction happened. That's all well and good. He went on his way. But he got in touch with me again recently, and he was a bit upset because he saw that Rocket Pool was trending everywhere. And he said, look, I do this a lot for a lot of different protocols, and I can tell that you paid for this because it's so strong, it's so persistent, and it's not going away. And he said, why didn't you let me do this for you? Because you guys said that you don't do this sort of thing.
That's incredible.
Absolutely hilarious, because I feel like probably the last couple of these calls, I've been talking about how busy it is, how many people are reaching out, wanting to learn more about Rocket Pool. You have the different various protocols. Even this morning, what did we have? There was a thread from Aura. There was the Index Coop DSETH launch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's
So
shoot, that's a pretty important one.
Yeah, exactly.
I've covered that. Yeah.
Get to that. But
should I jump to it, or do you want to keep going?
Yeah, let's jump to that now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so Index Co-op is a protocol that is famed somewhat for making complex DeFi packages into simpler forms. So they have the BED index, they have the DPI index, which is DeFi tokens ordered by market cap aggregated into one token. They also have the BED token is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and DeFi. So their shtick is to aggregate different asset classes together, sort of like ETFs, to make them more digestible, theoretically less risk, and more palatable for a lay audience. So with that mindset, they approached the LSD sector and have launched a distributed staked ETH token, which incorporates 44% rETH, some percent stETH, and some percent SWISE ETH. Rocket Pool's token is the largest chunk of the pie, and the assets sort of just sit together in this DSETH token, which can be redeemed for the underlying LSD tokens. So what this means for users, for the savvy user, this is probably not the best option. This token is not very DeFi friendly because it's a totally new token that does not have an oracle or anything like that. Additionally, it is not a yield. It's not especially yield bearing. It is not like an rETH wrapped stETH token where there is yield generation from fees in the underlying. There is no liquidity being built into the token itself, which was actually a major sticking point. When Index first came to Rocket Pool and pitched the idea, it was on top of a balancer pool. And there was going to be feedback back into bribery for the pool. And it was a great concept. It was similar to what we do with the Aura balancer ETH rETH pool, with fees generated going back into bribing the pool to create a bit more of a self-sustaining asset. Unfortunately, due to technical issues and other roadblocks, Index abandoned the balancer pool idea and opted to just have the assets sitting cold under DSETH. So this is still great for sort of the uninformed institution who just wants to ape with $10 million and wants to get sort of a low risk distribution. But if you are more inclined, I would recommend you look at other avenues. And it's further also questionable whether DSETH actually reduces risk or not. So definitely do some reading into, but it's going to be net positive for rETH demand for sure.
And that's not all, because we also have a very interesting panel discussion, which is taking place in just over a week's time. It is a liquid staking webinar hosted by IndexCoop, and there's going to be someone from Lido, someone from Stakewise, and probably our very own Langers representing Rocket Pool. So if you think back to the last time that these protocols were together on a panel,
ooh, snap.
there was it made some interesting viewing. So that's definitely something worth tuning into. It has been loaded into the Discord event section. I think it's probably the third one down, but would highly recommend that. The little blurb says the panel is on the state of the Ethereum staking industry and the challenges ahead. So,
interesting topic. Everyone for sure remembers the last panel was on supporting decentralized or small and at-home stakers. This one's not quite as pointed, but I'm sure there'll be some juicy conversation involved. And I highly recommend people to go ask questions if they can, because audience engagement is a great way to get fun answers.
I have 3 or 4 more topics to cover. So another podcast that we have, I believe it's a Twitter space first, but then it'll be released as a podcast, is if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that event section, there's a little bit of a TBC around the exact timing and where it is, but Langers will be hosted by Exponential Finance for a podcast series they call Degen Responsibly. So that is not until mid-March, so little way out, and on the other side of ETH Denver. So probably a little bit early to be talking about it, but the reason I bring it up for the context is we just had in trading early today someone from Exponential Finance being quite responsive in updating their metrics on Rocket Pool. So they have, I guess you could call it a bit of a review site where different protocols are assessed by their team and given different ratings. There was a bit of a bug in terms of what was displayed for Rocket Pool, but that's now displaying the highest available A rating. Further context on this was around a report that they recently released on another LSD protocol. Don't want to name names or anything, but they raised a potential concern. I'm sure it won't be too hard to find if you want to go have a look for it, or maybe someone will mention it in trading. But interesting morning regarding Exponential Finance there. A couple of
definitely shout out to them. They were very quick, and we were a bit impolite before they arrived, and they were still polite to us. So shout out to them.
Yes, that's a good point. I think especially in trading, if people aren't aware, just kind of the dynamic, and if they're more accustomed to other protocol discords, right, where not much happens, and then every few hours someone kind of posts a question or wants help, and a little bit of a cricket's going on. Trading is obviously the polar opposite of that. So I think they handled that quite well from Exponential Finance.
And before we jump into your next topic, Ken asked, is there any update from the team about ETH Denver? I believe Ken posted in a governance channel an update from the ETH Denver people that there will be 15,000 attendees potentially. So any updates from the team?
So actually, before we talk about that, I want to go over the next item on my list, which is
no problem.
The number of volunteers we have for ETH Denver. So actually, the last time we kind of talked about this in any great detail, there was a list of, I think, 37 or so people who had applied, and a few of them had said that they're willing to volunteer at the booth across multiple shifts. At least one person who said, I will be there permanently from open to close each day. And based on the level of support, we kind of figured out that we could get 3 to 4 people on the booth at each time, plus potentially at least one team member, likely to be more. That sounded sufficient. And with this increase in numbers, it's now sounding that it is maybe adequate, maybe just. But thankfully, in the interim, we now have 59 applications for volunteers through the form.
Wow.
Maybe I should relink that again, but at the same time, having to throw away my carefully created roster to build a new one, maybe 59 is enough. In saying that, there's no kind of cutoff or really any requirements to volunteer. There's a form just to make admin easy. If you show up on the day and want to help out, we can make something work. The reason for the form is just to try and optimize things as much as possible. So for people that are on certain days, to make sure there's kind of a spot for them, and to make sure if there are some people who are happy to be there all day, but for everyone else, we try and make sure it's a bit of a mix. If you're doing 2 shifts, ideally not back to back, ideally not both mornings, so there's a bit of freedom to get out and see everything else that ETH has to offer. So great to see the uptick in volunteers, but also it's a little bit like that ETH staking market share thing. You have to kind of keep up with what's going on in the big picture, and it sounds like ETH is only getting busier and busier. We had kind of just finalized an order for some of the merch, including t-shirts. We had quite a large order. We're talking about requiring a forklift to move stuff around. That's
Wow.
maybe something that we have to revisit. Yeah, sounds like it's going to be quite the event. And every day we get kind of more and more of the protocols that we chat to reaching out. Oh, you're going to be around, we can meet up, we can have a chat. So I think that side of things, the networking collaboration in person, is going to be insanely valuable at ETH. What else?
Will the bike be there? Will we be powering a validator?
Put it this way, if for whatever reason it doesn't happen, I think there's 1.5 days that we kind of arrive early before the main event kicks off. I will call an Uber. I will go to Walmart or whatever it's called myself and buy one. We're going to make it happen. Perfect. One way or another. I think It's an incredible marketing opportunity. Maybe we should talk about it here as well, because when we did kind of crowdsource this idea, it was on one of the Friday chit chats, which are not recorded, so there may be listeners who are not aware. And I think it was actually Kane who mentioned that someone had talked about it, or some reference to a bike powering a node a little bit earlier in the day in trading. So maybe me or someone else kind of saw that and subconsciously connected the dots. I think that original idea was as like a forced exercise, whereby if you're not on the bike for 30 hours a day, your node turns off. 30 minutes a day, your node turns off, and it's an enforcing exercise. But the way we're looking to implement it is if you hook up a bike, which can produce well more than the required power to run a node, to a battery pack, and the battery pack to a node, we could potentially have one running on site based on pedal power. And then potentially we could allocate merch, or there's photo opportunities as well, if people can stay on the bike for a given amount of time. Obviously, a block is pretty short. There's not really anything in between in terms of maybe it's something like
finalization.
Finalization, something like that. But yeah, I think that's something that will get people interested coming over to the booth. It'll also encourage them to hang around. And it also is something that Rocket Pool has which sets it apart, and that is kind of a physical object or presence that people can see and maybe not touch, but yeah,
People are
view.
going to want that POAP.
Oh yeah. I mean,
That POAP is
there'll
going to
also
be
be a
huge.
POAP as well. But yeah, you have other protocols who are doing great things, but it's all out there in the ether, so to speak, right? But for Rocket Pool, having the unique opportunity to say, this object right here is being powered, and it is maybe not helping to secure Ethereum, maybe a little bit of a stretch to actually have it running as a validator, but certainly as a node, yeah, it's pretty great. We had already talked about having a node on site, but the bike connection, I think, is just great from a marketing perspective. Yeah, hopefully we can see a whole lot of photos over social media, people powering the node with a little bit of Rocket Pool branding in the background. That'd be great.
I think it's going to go over phenomenally. Yeah. A couple more DeFi topics that should throw out there. There is a vote proposal for rETH to be onboarded to Euler Finance. Yes, that is the correct way to pronounce that, even though it's EUL. And Euler Finance is a permissionless lending and borrowing platform that will onboard rETH as collateral once the Chainlink Oracle is made available. Further, Aave v3 is going live on mainnet this Friday with rETH onboarding, I believe.
Yep.
Yep. It's not going to be E mode enabled, but I believe it will have rETH.
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, I think I guess first of all, most important topic, Euler, which I agree with you, by the way, but I recall seeing somewhere on, I don't know if it was their website or their Twitter or something, telling people to pronounce it as Euler, so not sure.
Really?
Yeah.
I know,
I'll see if I can
the
dig it up.
founder did a poll. That's funny.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember who Euler exactly is, but yeah, from years ago in maths class, I do remember it being pronounced that way. But yeah, so that vote will conclude, actually, I think it was just around the time that the next bi-weekly was going to be out. So it kind of was in between there. I was having a bit of a chat with the Euler guys about making sure there's some awareness around that. Unfortunately, yeah, it falls neatly in between the two, between two bi-weekly reports, but from the sounds of things, there's already a lot of attention on Twitter, so that's good, and looking forward to, wow, I'm sure the vote passing. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Last time I checked, there was a lot in the yes camp, so that's always a good sign. And I had one more thing, actually, and with that, I think we've kind of covered off. Oh no, two more. But one was to provide a little bit more context around one of the earlier topics that we talked about, which was the L2 work that Kane was doing. So I'm going to say a few things. I don't think many of these words are in the Bible, but this is what he said. So if anyone is interested, it can help to provide some context and explain why there might be a little bit more time than initially expected required to get this up and running. But there was an issue around the fact that we can't do a single basic transaction on L1. There is an off-chain calculation that's required to work out how much gas is needed on the L2. That makes things a little bit more complex, a little bit more build time required. But yeah, from the sounds of things, we'll have everything on testnet and testing underway end of day today. So that's
Sweet.
good. And then
honestly, there's not a huge rush to get the Polygon and zk Sync oracles ready. Their ecosystems are are sort of begging us for whenever we're ready.
Yep. And then the final topic, which caused a little bit of hype yesterday and was also mentioned during that impromptu call around 24 hours ago, is work being done on the Rocket Pool website. So I have to stress that this is kind of an initial idea. I guess you could call it a concept, very much a work in progress draft, all of those words together. So while this is being recorded, please don't play this back to me in a month's time when it doesn't perhaps align with your expectations. But we're having a bit of a look at it over the past couple of days. Personally, I think it looks great. There is less orange. It is being used as an accent around the page in different areas. The shade of orange,
cheering this top of his lungs right now.
The shade of orange being used, I think, looks really good. It works well in both light and dark modes. Yes, there are both light and dark modes. And overall, I think the design is probably more in line with what you might expect from, I guess you could say, a kind of best practice, crisp, clean, professional image. Certainly, some of the best practices around website design are being taken into consideration. The use of kind of 3D type of assets and display assets, and also making sure there's space to include some more video, graphic, infographic explanations around the place, so it's not simply text. I think it looks great, and also the potential to migrate solid stakers across to Rocket Pool at Shanghai is also a reason why we need to have an area to send these people, because generally you'd expect them to be a different demographic to most people who access the Rocket Pool website. If they've already run their own node for several months, they are likely to be quite well informed about the space. They already have a lot of expertise, technical knowledge. The kind of questions they might have, the answers that they're looking for would be different to someone who's wanting to launch a node for the first time. So making sure that we kind of segment out the website, we have landing pages or locations that we can send people to make sure they can get the information they need is very important, and that will also be taken into consideration with this design. As to when it will be launched / sneak peeks given, not really sure in that respect, but rest assured it is being looked at, being worked on. And another thing that is, likely to happen around Atlas, Shanghai. So a lot of great work going on behind the scenes by everyone. So looking forward to that as well.
Am I correct in understanding that this is sort of Nick's baby?
Yes, that's right. I think my input will come a little bit later on when it comes to maybe some of the copy or language being used. But Nick's doing a lot of work on this. Not necessarily as easy as you might think in terms of choosing colors and design elements and light mode, dark mode, desktop, mobile, all of that.
Total redesign is
SEO optimization.
Yeah. I'm curious, how long has he been working on this in the background? Because this is absolutely a ton of work to do an entire redesign solo.
I'm not too sure, to be honest. It's something that we have been discussing on and on for a little while, since last year. In terms of actual work being done, not too sure. But from what I've seen, there's clearly been some work put in, a lot of great work. It's not something that was started yesterday or last week, but we'll probably have some updates about this later on, maybe next month. See how we go.
Huge shout out to Nick. Yeah. So, is that the last topic we have for the day?
Yeah, that's all I had.
That was a very jam-packed call. So for the first half of today, we had guests from Pendle Finance talk about how you can use their split yield functioning to boost your yield on your rETH or your rETH balancer tokens. Their protocol allows you to separate yield-bearing assets into fixed income, yield-bearing portions and principal assets. So this is a bit of a higher level DeFi topic, but if you want to juice your rETH yields, definitely check out Pendle. In the second half of this call, we talked about all the variety of updates in the Rocket Pool ecosystem in approximately the past 3 weeks. We talked about the work on onboarding Polygon and ZK Sync through the Oracle. We talked about the MetaMask onboarding and how that it might change in the future. We also discussed the self-limiting principles that have generated quite a bit of buzz and are now on the DAO forum. And we also discussed the various topics that are going to be moving through governance related to some minor but important changes in governance and committee structure. There were also some streams that happened, including chit chats and 2 bigger streams, Kevin Iwaki and Hudson James. There was some discussion on the Chainlink Oracle now that the gears are officially starting to turn, as well as a little bit of discussion about potential Atlas timeline. We then moved on into some other topics like care to share some topics from your half of the list, Mav?
It feels like it might be one of those things where it's quicker to list what we didn't talk about. But yes, so we talked about ETH Denver, the surge in not only attendees overall, but Rocket Pool volunteers, which was great to see. We talked about a little bit of the action taking place in the world of Twitter, both for Rocket Pool and the LSD sector in general. We went over a couple of calls/panel podcasts coming up that you might want to tune into, including an interesting one with Index Coop, and also some work being done on the Rocket Pool website, which I think tied together the whole, one of the themes of the call, which is everything pointing towards Shanghai. So between now and then, we expect to see kind of a continual ramp up in activity in all of these spaces. ETH Denver in between. It's going to be a couple busy months for Rocket Pool.
It is up only in the Rocket Pool ecosystem as work is continuing on all sides. Thank you everyone for tuning in with us. We will be having many more calls in the near future. Check out the events tab in the Rocket Pool Discord to see when we will be ready for you next.
Thanks, Jasper. Thanks to the Pendle guys, and thanks to everyone who came up and asked questions and is listening live on Twitter and later on YouTube. See you on the next call.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.